Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here with a small but quite exciting book haul. These are just a few books that I picked up. I haven't done nearly the amount of book shopping that I tend to do in the spring, but I did have a couple of fun pre-orders come in and I did go on two quick adventures. So let's talk about them. Firstly, in the town that I work in, their spring book sale always manages to coincide with the high school musical production. So, since I was staying late to watch the musical anyway, I decided to stop in at the book sale beforehand. And I only picked up two things, the first of which I'm quite excited about. It's nonfiction called Elizabeth and Lester by Sarah Gristwood. And this is supposedly a biography of Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. Now, I've read so many things, both fiction and nonfiction, over the years, discussing their relationship and what it might have been like, but they have been mainly fiction. So I would be interested to see a nonfiction perspective. What actual evidence do we have? Plus, it's blurbed by Alison Weir, who I love and trust, and Simon Sebag Montefiore, another well respected historian. So I'm excited to see what this has to say. And then the other one I picked up is Carmen and Other Stories by Prosper Mérimée. And this is the short story and presumably other short stories that the opera Carmen was based on. And I've never actually read it before, so I am really intrigued to see what the original short story was like. Let's see, some of the other titles listed on the back are Colomba, Matteo Falcone, the Storming of the Redoubt, Tamango, The Etruscan Vase, and The Game of Backgammon, The Venus of Il, and Lokis. All of which sound very interesting. I've never read any of them, but the brief description of those sound really intriguing. So hopefully one day soon I will pick this up and see what these stories are actually like. Those are translated from the French, by the way. I don't know by whom, but someone at Oxford World Classics. Then the other major book shopping venture I went on was in April. Marissa of Blatantly Bookish wanted to go on a little bit of a New York City book crawl for her birthday this year. So we did exactly that, and she was extremely restrained. I am quite proud of her. I, on the other hand, was not as restrained. So these are some of the things I picked up. First up, we both debated over Uproar, and she ultimately decided that she would not have time to read it right now, but I will give this to her eventually once I have read it. And this is all about cartooning. It's called Satire, Scandal, and Printmakers in Georgian London. So, presumably, it's about the rise of the political cartoon and what that did to politics and society and journalism. So I'm intrigued to see what this has to say. Also, a full circle moment. I picked up The Merry Spinster Tales of Everyday Horror by Daniel M. Lavery. He transitioned after this book was published. But this is a book that a friend of mine bought at the Strand years ago when we were there together after a theater outing. And I always said I wanted to borrow it from him. And right now, that's not really a possibility anymore. So now I have my own copy. And so I'm very intrigued to see this. This, as I remember, is a bunch of short stories, partially retelling fairy tales. I know there's definitely one that deals with The Little Mermaid, which is what the cover is based on, but it retells them in a very funny and very practical way and points out the impracticalities of many fairy tales. And I remember it being very funny and uplifting. So I'm excited to see what these are actually like. I also found a copy of Murder on Mystique by Anne Glenconner. That would be Lady Anne Glenconner, whose memoirs were so well received a few years ago. And this is her fiction series, I believe partly autobiographical. She and her husband do own Possibly they own the entire Caribbean island, certainly run it as a sort of resort. So this is a murder mystery, I believe, that she wrote based on those experiences. I also found a copy of The Secret River by Kate Grenville, which I have had on my TBR list on Goodreads since I started it. I saw this in my college library and just never got around to reading it. And this is about William Thornhill in 1806, who commits some sort of mistake and is transported to New South Wales. And it's about the journey and him starting a new life in Australia. It sounds fascinating. I also found a copy of one of the sequels to the All of a Kind family, and I have the original collection. And I know I read a lot of the sequels, but I don't own them. So I was thrilled to find this copy. This is a children's classic series about a very large family in New York. They are a Jewish family around the turn of the century, and just the everyday issues that come up, the everyday trouble that the children get into, the celebration of Purim, the birth of a new younger sibling. They're very sweet and delightful little short stories, and I'm so thrilled to have this. I also found two very interesting mythology compendiums. The first is the Orkneyinga saga. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's described as the history of the Earls of Orkney, which are some of the outer islands in Scotland. And I'm just going to read the back to you because I could not summarize this if I tried. It says, written around 1200 by an unknown author, the Orkneyinga saga is an intriguing fusion of myth, legend, and history. The only medieval work to have Orkney as the central place of action, it tells of an era when the islands were still part of the Viking world, beginning with their conquest by the kings of Norway in the 9th century. The saga describes the subsequent history of the earldom of Orkney and the adventures of great Norsemen such as Sigurd the Powerful, St. Magnus the Martyr, and Rolf the Conqueror of Normandy. Savagely powerful and poetic, this is a fascinating depiction of an age of brutal battles, murder, sorcery, and bitter family feuds. And this is translated from whatever language this was first written in by Herman Paulsen and Paul Edwards. That sounds fascinating. I've never heard of these, but the Scottish Islands have always been fascinating to me, and so have the Vikings. So to have the two meet like this is really fantastic. And I also found the Táin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. My Gaelic is not great. And this was translated by Kieran Carson. This is, I believe, Northern Irish epic. Again, I'm going to read you the back because I cannot describe this well myself.
Editing Heather here to say that for the remainder of this description, I repeatedly mispronounce the name Cuchulainn, mainly because I've never seen it written down. So I have come to that realization I will pronounce it correctly from here forward.
For jealousy of her husband's prize bull, Maeve, Queen of Connacht, takes her people to war to steal its match from Ulster, the legendary brown bull of Cooling, I think. With the Ulstermen stricken by a curse, only the youthful Cuchulainn stands against Connacht's assembled armies. But in feats of supernatural strength and extravagant violence, he sets about bloodily disassembling them. Full of black comedy and brutal action, The Táin, the longest and most important tale of the Ulster cycle, is the great epic of Irish folk literature, and the heroic, monstrous Cuchulainn, one of the most mercurial, engaging characters in any literature. This sounds fascinating. These are things that I have vaguely heard of in my exploration of Irish mythology, but now I get to really dive into what they actually were and maybe figure a few things out. Then I also found a copy of This Time Next Year by Sophie Cousins. I read Is She Really Dating Him, I believe, in November. and really enjoyed it. So I'm intrigued by this one. I don't know if I'm going to love it as much, but I hope I will. This is another romance novel in which our couple, I believe, keeps meeting on New Year's Eve year after year, and we see the gradual evolution of their relationship. Sounds quite cute. And then finally, a book Marissa told me I had to pick up is Jane Austen Cover to Cover. This is a book that she owns and finds really fascinating. And this, I believe, just looks at the many, many editions of Jane Austen's novels that have come out over the years and their cover designs and why certain publishers have chosen certain covers. It sounds really cool and really fascinating, so I will add this to my Jane Austen July pile of possibilities. Then we get into three other books that I either pre-ordered or just had to pick up. The first of them is Three Bags Full by Leonie Swan. This is translated from the German by Anthea Bell, and this is the novel that the movie The Sheep Detectives is based on. And it looks really cute. I do want to see the film, but I do want to read the book first, especially knowing, even before having read it, that they made significant changes between this book and the film. I will let you know what I think of this. It still sounds delightfully sweet and funny, but it's probably going to be very different. So I would love to be able to compare the two fairly. Then we get to my pre-orders, and the first thing I pre-ordered last year, actually, I forgot this was coming at this point, is Becoming the Teacher I Needed by Jerry Chang. If you don't follow Ms. Chang on social media, I highly recommend that you do. She is wonderfully funny and hopeful and inspirational. She is a gifted teacher in the Atlanta area in elementary schools, and she is also openly queer and has a lovely family and just a delightful human being. And she has written a book, presumably about what it was like growing up for her as a queer child in very small town, very conservative Georgia, and how that inspired her to become the teacher that she is now. So I do want to read this. I think this will be wonderful. I think I'm going to save it for August, though, before I go back into the classroom. And if you need to find out what she looks like, there she is. If she comes across your social media pages, follow her. She is wonderful. And then lastly, a book that I am so excited about, but I'm not sure I am going to be able to show it to you and hold the microphone at the same time, but I'm going to try, is this book, which just about fits in the frame. It is The Making of American Girl, as published by American Girl. And this tells the story of the early years of the company, which I know and remember so well. The company was founded in 1986. For those of you who don't know, I came to it in 1996, and it was a huge and formative part of my childhood and the childhoods of a lot of my friends. And so this tells the story of how Pleasant Rowland founded the company, what the initial ideas and inspiration and initial sketches looked like for all six of the original characters. It is a beautiful book, and I have seen so many people saying, oh, it's a coffee table book. You won't end up reading it cover to cover. You'd best believe I am reading this cover to cover. We get insight from all of the authors that worked on the books that accompanied each doll, fabric swatches, color palettes, how they came up with all of the color palettes. It's a beautiful and really well done book. It covers the American Girl magazine that came out, the founding of the original American Girl place in Chicago, all things I remember and hold so dearly. So this is a really special addition to my collection. So there you have it. Those are some books that I have acquired in the recent couple of months. Let me know down below if you have recommendations for me, if you have further questions about some of these books, or if you are particularly excited to hear my thoughts on any of them, and I will try to work them into future TBRs a little bit sooner. Let me know if you've acquired any really exciting books. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye, everyone.